Jeff Norman, The Norman Report.
As you might have heard, a 60-minute segment about deportees imprisoned in El Salvador, where the Trump administration sent hundreds of Venezuelan migrants last March, did not air as scheduled on December 21st. Just a day and a half before it was set to broadcast, CBS News editor-in-chief Bari Weiss decided to hold the story. She said she wanted someone from the Trump administration to be interviewed on camera, and she provided the 60 Minutes team with the personal cell phone numbers of White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller and Border Czar Tom Homan. Although CBS announced the report will air in a future broadcast, and Weiss later told her staff she wants it to air as soon as possible, Sharyn Alfonsi, who reported the postponed segment, sent a note to her 60 Minutes colleagues accusing Weiss of killing the story and doing it for a political rather than editorial reason. In her note, Alfonsi also said her team had requested responses to questions and/or interviews with DHS, the White House, and State Department, and they all refused. Although the segment didn't air in the U.S., it was seen in Canada, and at the very end of it, Alfonsi said this.
The Department of Homeland Security declined our request for an interview and referred all questions about CCOT to El Salvador. The government there did not respond to our request.
So, as you heard, Alfonsi mentioned only one request that was made for an interview and said nothing about asking for, let alone receiving, written statements. But on December 22nd, Isabella Simonetti reported in the Wall Street Journal that responses had been sought and received from DHS, the White House, and State Department, but were not included in the segment. Apart from CBS, Alfonsi's media peers have responded much as she did. That is, they're pretending the story was killed rather than held until the boss thinks it's ready. They're also insisting that the 60 Minutes team tried so hard to land an interview, and it's therefore unreasonable for Weiss to want them to keep trying. For example, in a December 23rd article published in The Guardian, Margaret Sullivan told her readers that Alfonsi argued eloquently and persuasively that 60 Minutes repeatedly sought a comment and was turned down. Repeatedly? I politely asked Sullivan on her X page what she's referring to, and so did a few other people. Instead of answering us, Sullivan locked her account, and now only approved followers can see her posts. Likewise, media critic Jeff Cohn commented on his Facebook page that in her report, Alfonsi had mentioned repeated efforts to get responses from the administration. There's that word again, repeated, even though Alfonsi mentioned only one interview request. So I asked Cohn what he's talking about. He didn't answer. NPR media critic Eric Deggans sang the same song on his Facebook page. The way Deggans put it is, they tried numerous times to get a comment. Numerous? He not only refused to tell me how he knows about these numerous attempts, he also instructed me to stop with this nonsense and listen to the experts, because I've never reported a story and have never been edited. I don't know how he knows that. I also don't know what sort of expertise is needed to ask him what his source is. But I do know that Eric Deggans, in addition to pontificating for NPR, is a college professor specializing in the field of media issues, ethics, and journalism. So I decided to take his advice and speak with attorney Charles Glasser, who's also a professor. Moreover, Glasser spent 14 years as the global media counsel for Bloomberg News, where he was responsible for pre-publication review, ethics issues, and training the company's reporters on legal issues and journalistic fundamentals. He also worked in the legal department at NBC News and was a journalist for 13 years. I asked Glasser what he thinks about Margaret Sullivan's article and about Sharyn Alfonsi's response to her story being held, and about the way Bari Weiss's detractors instantly embraced an apparently baseless narrative. Here are some of his thoughts.
Listen, Margaret needs to take a dose of her own medicine, because if you look at that paragraph, right, does it quote Alfonsi saying that? Does it cite to Alfonsi saying that somewhere? Does it say told The Guardian? No, it does not. The spin on this is just remarkable. The story was not killed, okay? It was held up. Newsrooms are not a democracy. She's the boss, period. Editor-in-chief is the king or queen of that newsroom. And wise leaders in all fields of endeavor take advice and confer with colleagues and interact. But her decision at the end of the day is her decision. And I have to tell you, the great newsrooms, I cannot imagine this happening. And I've worked in, as you know, in some of them for a considerable length of time. This would never fly at Bloomberg. It would never fly at the Wall Street Journal. It would never fly at Dow Jones. If you've got a problem with a story, yeah, you can piss and moan and make an argument at the editorial meetings, and, you know, that's fine. But you don't put it out there and craft this narrative that you are somehow the victim. The idea that a reporter would throw a temper tantrum and make all these claims and be the victim, you know, oh, the man is trying to silence my voice. And of course, they try and make it about, oh, this is caving into Trump. You just have to stop blaming Trump for an internal problem.
What do you say to those who are assuming the Trump administration gave 60 Minutes ridiculous answers that just weren't good enough to use?
Don't think for the reader. Don't be afraid of letting the donkeys bray. Let the asses bray, as Nat Hentoff used to say. And if anybody, Trump, be it Hillary Clinton, I don't care. Whoever is on the other side of the question, if they send you gibberish, boil it down and it'll look like gibberish.
I mentioned Jeff Cohn earlier. Now, this is a guy who has a lot of impressive credentials, not the least of which is that he was the producer of Phil Donahue's MSNBC show. So more than most people, Jeff knows exactly what's involved in booking high-profile, in-demand guests. And I would think that it's sometimes necessary to be quite persistent, and that it's helpful to be able to directly contact the person being sought rather than going through a representative. But Jeff insisted it wouldn't be appropriate to call Stephen Miller or Tom Homan or whomever on their personal cell phones because of the, quote, repeated efforts that had already been made. But for all we know at this point, those repeated efforts might be non-existent. Nonetheless, he says calling someone's cell phone would in this case amount to begging, and that would be just too unseemly, according to Jeff. What do you think, Charles?
Journalists worth their salt, right? Any journalist on any beat worth their salt has the private cell number of big guy and big guy's number one man, you know, their body man, right? On their cell phone. That's just the way it works. Hey, listen, I'm trying to reach so-and-so. I want to do an interview. That goes on tens of thousands of times a day.
It seems to me that some of the migrants sent to CCOT weren't even gang members. And regardless, nobody deserves to be tortured. So I'd like whatever is going on there to be exposed. Do you think this 60 Minutes story will eventually air even if nobody from the Trump administration is willing to do an on-camera interview?
Bari Weiss is a good enough reporter to move the story anyway, right? And said, we did everything we could. Here's what they said, boiled down, it's, you know, whatever, you know, a toss away paragraph and you're done. You're done.